Welcome. Thank you for being here. If you wouldn't mind giving us a like, and consider going ahead and subscribing as well, that would be fantastic. And if you really want to go the extra mile, go down to the description below and click the Patreon link. Lots of cool stuff going on there. As always, I love you, and enjoy the show, guys.
The DeathWorlders, a story by user Hambone. Chapter 23, Back Down to Earth. Part 2. Date point, 10 years, 2 months, and 2 weeks after Vancouver. Commune of Females, Wee Cow City, Gao. Regari. You are approaching a commune of females, male. Identify yourself. Regari was in no mood for games. The message from Warhorse was far too important to pass to Ima digitally. This was a conversation, and one that he was itching to have. You can't be serious, Sister Lyra. You've seen me every third or fourth day for a quarter of a year. It's me! He pointed out, making a beeline for the door. He nearly walked into her ceremonial fusion spear, which was suddenly charged and spitting hot while aimed levelly at his chest. Behind it, her ears were up, and her eyes bright with dutiful challenge. Identify yourself, she repeated. Frustration, outrage, and the burning need to deliver his message had badly eroded Regari's composure anyway. Having a weapon leveled at him was the final insult that forced him to do something that, under normal circumstances, no sane male would have even considered. He snarled at a female. Regari! To deliver a message to Mother Ima. Now get out of my way, you witless, parasite-infested, officious, plodding forepaw! Her spear tip lowered and her ears rotated backwards out of sheer surprise, and whether out of genuine intimidation or whether she had finally got her head around the urgency of his mission, she stood meekly aside after a moment's consideration. Regari swept past her. Unlike the Whitecrest Enclave, the Commune of Females wasn't a single architecturally planned building, but several, built organically over the centuries as the needs of the females had changed and as available funds and labor had dictated. Not that the females were ever short on either funds or labor, thanks to the thousands of attention-hungry males who lived in the city outside their walls. Still, at some point, a senior mother had declared that the entrance to the commune needed to be something both imposing and beautiful, and so an appropriately grand building, far wider than it was tall, had been constructed. From the outside, its most striking features were its sweeping white stone stairs and the doors at their top. Huge talkwood things with borders of angular geometric silver filigree that were only ever opened for important occasions. The actual entrances were the rather more discreet, though similarly decorated frosted glass sliding doors to either side, one of which whispered open for him as he approached, and was ignored as he passed through. Impressive though it was outside, Regari had always thought that the inside of the commune's grand building was by far more beautiful. The floor was an irregular library of differently colored slate tiles, left naturally just a little rough on their upper surface, but still smooth enough for completely unimpeded movement. Lighting was provided by hidden lamps which bounced warm yellow light up into the vault of the ceiling. At ankle height in the wall, hidden projectors sent ripples of a faintly greenish hue playing over the slate floor tiles, creating a watery effect which neatly complemented the real flowing water that rose in a fountain behind the talkwood doors, before being sent to run and chatter down twin shallow meandering channels that reached out into each wing of the building, before vanishing into the walls to emerge outside and feed the ornamental ponds. Every inch of the wall was trellis or bas-relief. Regari always had to take a moment to admire the hanging plants, attended by delicate little flying drones. They had been carefully chosen so that some were always in flower no matter the season, and right now the grand concourse was kissed with delicate whites and blues. Mothers and sisters were walking and chatting, sitting on the benches, reading. There was an air of tension that Regari could smell and feel in the fur of the back of his neck. Several of the nearby females glanced at him, saw a white-crest male, and promptly and obviously turned away to keep their conversation private. He noticed Sister Myun watching him, and the two shared an affectionate, though subtle, mutual pricking of ears at one another. She had been pulled from gate guard duty for the duration of her pregnancy, though she still loitered in the concourse, as much because she loved it there as because she was, by her own estimation, about the most competent of the commune's guardian sisters. Certainly, she was the strongest and most highly trained, having spent much of her adolescence blending the kung fu that she learned from Shu with stances and styles more appropriate for a Gowan, many of which were now part of Whitecrest's training regime. Regari had sparred with her during their courtship and had never once managed to knock her off her feet. The young female could float and flow like dawn mist when she wanted to. Regari glanced around to quickly check whether Ima was present, then concluded that Myun had just as much right to know. "You know, Sister Layra reported you arriving," she said as she approached, laying aside her tablet. "I think you impressed her." "That may not have been wise," Regari conceded, "but this is important and she was in my way." "What's so important that you'd snap at a commune guard like that?" Myun asked. "I mean, Layra probably wants to mate with you now, but if it had been anybody else, you—" "The humans found Shu," Regari interrupted her, ignoring that nugget of intel for the time being. Myun surged to her feet. "Shu safe?" "They picked her up from an escape pod this morning." Much as he'd have preferred to keep the original, Regari had to admit that having a prosthetic paw with a built-in gesture-based control interface for his data was unbelievably convenient. He summoned Warhorse's message and sent it to Myun's device, which she snatched up and interrogated eagerly. She impressed and pleased Regari by reaching up to the communicator clipped to her ear and pinching it before he had even thought to ask her. "Security Central, Mother Ima has a priority message waiting on the Grand Concourse. Call for her, please. Priority message for Mother Ima, Grand Concourse." She listened to the response, then growled a little. Her contract with Regari had earned Myun some prestige, a fact which spoke volumes of Regari's own reputation. But she was still very much the junior on the security forces, and somebody somewhere was keen to keep her reminded of that fact. Nothing ever went as swiftly and smoothly as she would have liked. "It's a personal message, Central, but very important and private. Please call for her, thank you." She sighed and unclipped the communicator, muttering a loaned human curse once it was safely turned off. "Bitch!" Regari chittered quietly. "Anyway, I don't know more than is in the message there, though if Warhorse thinks she had a rough time of it, I'm a little worried." "Is there any way to find out more?" Myun asked. "It's a lot easier to get a message from the SOR than to the SOR, Regari mused. Both of them pricked their ears up as they heard the commune-wide announcement for Ima. "Ima has Yolna's ear," Myun pointed out, borrowing yet another human phrase. She did that a lot, peppering her language with DeathWorlder colloquialisms. Regari had almost begun developing the same habit, but had carefully avoided it. He had the political consequences to think about. Myun, on the other hand, seemed to have accepted that her enthusiasm for all things human was equal parts profitable and isolating. Either that, or she was too headstrong to care. "True, but Yolna is not Mother Supreme yet," Regari pointed out. "She may not have as much influence as you think." "She's going to win, and the humans know it," Myun retorted. She'd been a stubborn cub and was now a stubborn and slightly naive adult. The fact that Regari agreed with her assessment was unimportant. "What's that expression about those birds you shouldn't count?" "Before they hatch. Chickens," Myun finished for him, deflating. "You're right, but it's Shu." They both jumped a little at Ima's voice. "Shu? What about Shu?" Regari stood and they exchanged the nose rub of old friends. "They found her. She's alive." Ima made a squeaking noise of delight and relief and sank onto the bench beside Myun, ears swiveling like robots in an assembly line as she tried to settle on a reaction. "Where is she? Can we see her?" "I don't know yet," Regari told her. "I only just got the message. She's back on Earth. It sounds like she got into more trouble." Ima nodded. "That would be Shu," she agreed, then stood up again. "So we're going to Earth." Both Regari and Myun's ears flattened. You can't be serious," Myun squeaked. "I have waited nearly 10 years to finally see her again, and kick her ass for running away," Ima proclaimed. "I am not letting a little thing like a Class 12 Death World get in my way." She turned to Regari. "Besides, didn't you say that the humans wanted to give you some kind of an award?" "Well, yes, but nobody ever mentioned actually going to Earth," Regari replied. "The pollens in the air on that planet would kill us." "We can wear breathing masks. The gravity excursion suits. I've had a long time to think about this, Regari. I'm going. I would like you to come with me." "Don't you have a cub to look after?" Regari asked. "I also have a sister who needs my help," Ima retorted. "Of the two, Shu will need me more. The cub is nearly weaned." "She's clan, Regari," Myun pointed out. "What would you do if she was a Whitecrest?" Regari hesitated, then ducked his head slowly. "I'd already be calling for a shuttle." The females ducked their own heads, then Myun sighed. "I wish I could come with you," she said. "You're pregnant," Ima pointed out. "I know, that's why I said I wish I could," Myun agreed. "But take a message for me." "Of course." "I'll take a Whitecrest ship to Cimbrian and arrange things," Regari said. "That should take long enough for your cub to be weaned." "Good." Ima scratched at her ear thoughtfully. "I'll go tell Yelna she needs to do without me for a while." "Ima? She's been in stasis for 5 human years," Regari said, "and it was an escape pod. She may be a bit fragile." Ima just chittered. "When was Shu ever not fragile?" Date point: 10 years, 2 months, and 2 weeks after Vancouver. Vancouver General Hospital, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, Earth. Colonel Ted Bartlett. "She's tough." The family were waiting outside, pacing and chewing their fingernails and desperate to be let in. Not that it would do them any good. Miss Chang was sedated and would remain so for several days. She had been jumped straight to Scotch Creek from Caledonia's onboard jump array and had been airlifted from there to Vancouver General, still inside a stasis pod. She had arrived on an operating table that was perfectly prepared for her, and that fact had undoubtedly saved her life. The fact that she had even made it that far spoke volumes of her tenacity. Her doctor was in no mood to entertain military scientists, however. "She undoubtedly is," she agreed. "But I would very much appreciate knowing why I've got an Army colonel in my ITU, please." Ted nodded. "Dr. Spilney, I need to swear you to secrecy on a few things. This is going to be important to her care, but it's also important for... well..." He handed over a tablet with a non-disclosure agreement on it. The doctor skimmed it. It wasn't long, and then scrawled her signature and pressed her thumb to the biometric pad for good measure. "Miss Chang is one of the few people we know of to survive nerve jam trauma," Ted told her, after he'd countersigned. "Are you familiar with nerve jam at all?" "I heard it's some kind of alien weapon that can induce fatal seizures," Spilney conceded. "It's a lot nastier than that," Ted revealed solemnly. "I'll spare you the jargon, but it works by creating a field that disrupts some specific types of quantum activity that's part of the brain's normal function, or rather, forces it to behave a certain..." He trailed off. "The point is that while the effect may wear off instantly, the damage it does is permanent." "Her brain is scarred?" Ted nodded grimly. "Intimately. On a cellular chemistry level, or most likely, anyway. The testimony of her friends would suggest as much." Mr. Atsicity and Miss Bueller had weathered the vacuum of space rather better than Miss Chang, and were both recovering elsewhere in the building. Atsicity's foot was attracting prosthetic and rehabilitation specialists from all over North America, who were sharing detailed footage and images of it with their colleagues overseas. By all accounts, the interface between flesh and synthetic material was ingeniously self-sterilizing and might well revolutionize the field of human prosthetics. Bartlett, as a lifelong enthusiast for science, was keeping a weather eye on that development, but it was outside of his field. To be frank, so was the case of Miss Chang, but nobody else was even half as qualified as Ted was, so... Dr. Spilney frowned at her patient deep in thought. "Prognosis?" I'm not qualified to give one. Obviously, actually testing the long-term effects of nerve jam would be unethical. Lab rats? You can't really scale up the behavior of rats to the behavior of humans, Ted squirmed. But what we suspect is that any existing psychological tendencies or predispositions are likely to be exacerbated. The other thing we noticed was a spike in learning retention and neuroplasticity for some time after exposure, which then tapered off to below previous levels, leaving the subjects strongly influenced by whatever they were doing immediately after the trauma. Spilney frowned at her patient again, watching her chest rise and fall with a click-hiss-wheeze as the ventilator did the work on her behalf. Ted gave her a minute to think, which he used to produce a copy of the research paper from his briefcase. The paper should explain more. We don't really have any advice on what you can do for her, but any observations you can make or data you can gather might help us help her and other future victims. Spilney nodded and accepted it. I'll be sure to do that. There's one last thing. Which is? Ted produced a handheld implant scanner from his briefcase. It was little more than a gray cuboid, not dissimilar to the tricorders he'd watched on Star Trek growing up. May I just lean in there and perform a scan? It's not invasive, is it? Ultrasound. Spilney just gestured to the bed invitingly. Ted leaned in past the assorted tubes, lines, and leads, and pressed the scanner gently but firmly against Miss Chang's forehead. 3 seconds later, the LED on its back lit up green, and he breathed a sigh of relief. While the SOR and the medical staff on Caledonia had both already checked her for alien hardware, Ted's own device was the most recent and sophisticated model that wouldn't be fooled by non-metallic implants as had happened in the tragic case of Sarah Tisdale's murderer. Thank you, Doctor. He straightened up, pocketing the scanner. Thank you, Colonel. Ted let himself out. He didn't make eye contact with the family hovering outside, just nodded politely, touched his fingers to his brow, and made himself scarce, wishing he could do more. Date point: 10 years, 2 months, and 2 weeks after Vancouver. HMS Sharman, HMNB Folktha, Cimbrian, the far reaches. John Burgess. It was good movie night. Sometimes the guys wanted a good movie to counterbalance all the awful ones they liked to watch, and it was a good way to round off a mission day. The dorm was clean, they were all showered, and now there were a few hours of quiet time to lounge around in ranger shorts and watch something. Hence they were watching The Pink Panther, the old one, with Peter Sellers. That had been the plan, at least, right up until somebody had asked where Warhorse had got to, and John had tried to explain. "And you didn't think to tell him sooner?" Titan was asking, plainly angry. "Man, when did I even have the chance?" The movie was on pause, and the usual comfortable puppy pile on the couch had broken up into a standing argument. Sykes opened his mouth to comment, and John nodded in anticipation of what he was going to say. Okay, yeah, lots of times, but come on, man, timing. We were all on edge, Then, just as I was about to tell him, he went and proposed to her. And then before he had a chance to get over that, we had the mission, and you should have told him, Titan asserted. You're supposed to be our fucking brother, man, and you're lying a horse of all people about his girl fucking around? Sykes agreed. Firth weighed in. You two are like the bromance of this outfit. How the fuck are you gonna stand by and let Horse get jodied? We're supposed to trust you with our lives, Blazinski added. That stung. It downright hurt, in fact. You know you can, John protested quietly. Do we? 'Cause if you can help Horse's girl suck some other asshole's skinny fucking dick... Say what? John rounded on Titan. I didn't fucking help her. You let her keep on doing it, didn't ya? Blazinski retorted. 'Cause the alternative was ripping Horse's heart out of his fucking chest at exactly the wrong moment, man. John illustrated the mental image with a gesticulation. We wouldn't have him if I'd done it before now. You think he'd have made it through without at least, the idea of her? And I'm not sure I'd have made it through without him. You think it was a choice between this or no protectors at all? Rebar checked. John sighed and nodded. Could be, he agreed. Even Horse has his limits, man. The three defenders exchanged quick glances, communicating silently. Tell me he was at least pissed at you, Firth demanded. He was fucking furious, bro. Surprised he didn't tie your ass in a pretzel, Titan said. Fuck, he's gonna have a face like Armageddon landing when he gets back. Yup, John agreed. Yeah, well, you fucking deserve it. Sykes folded his arms. Come on, don't be like that. It's not like I did it to help her. But you did help her, though. Lads, everyone looked at Murray. Murray was like that. You could completely forget he was there until he opened his mouth. And softly Scottish though his speech might have been, everyone shut up and listened. Never mind that he was the smallest of the SOR's enlisted men. He commanded attention whenever he chose to. Let's just watch the movie. Everyone paused, then settled a bit. There was a round of nods and murmured agreements, and the guys all sat back down on the couch. Baseball was left standing. Hey, let me in there, he ventured. Couch is full, John, Firth told him, not looking at him. Dude, I was sitting right there a minute ago. Couch is full. John directed a pleading look first at Rebar, who was avoiding eye contact, and then at Murray, who gave him a complicated facial shrug which said quite clearly that he wasn't about to rekindle the argument by disagreeing, and that John was just going to have to put up with it. After a moment's hesitation, John settled for a resigned throat clear and sitting cross-legged on the hard, cold floor next to the couch, rather than wrapped up with his buddies. It didn't feel right at all, and not even Sellers' dignified on-screen antics could fix that. They watched in silence for a little while, even managing a collective chuckle at the exchange. If I were my father, I'd have you tortured. If you were your father, I doubt very much if I would have kissed you. The tension seemed to be just about starting to dissipate. Or maybe that was just wishful thinking on John's part, when there was a distant, muffled roar of some kind and the whole building shook as if a bomb had gone off nearby. Huge, metal-framed, and reinforced as it was, they still knocked the couch over and scrambling off it, alert for danger. What the fuck? Firth asked. Sounded like it came from the gym. Murray aimed a thumb towards it. Ah, shit. You don't think Adam... He was left standing as the rest of them took off at a run. Waiting for them in the gym was a sight more disturbing than anything John had seen on Capitol Station or in training. Adam's jerry can was lying at the bottom of the wall at the far end of the gym, from where it was usually kept, and had burst open, spilling buckshot all over the floor. The wall itself had a crater in it about halfway up, where the cinder blocks had been smashed in by something very heavy hitting it with huge force. The 100-pound plates were all off their racks and scattered around the gym like schoolyard frisbees. The spring steel barbell at the deadlift station, the one commissioned especially for the protectors, had bent beyond hope of repair. The one at the squat rack was now roughly the shape of a hockey stick, and Adam was sitting in the middle of the floor, cradling his elbow and sobbing. Baseball was at his side in a flash. Oh man, brother, Whoa! The air rushed straight out of him, and he felt a stab of pain in his ribs as he found himself caught in the kind of crushing bear hug that might have pulped an alien and badly hurt most humans. There was nothing to do but put his own arms around his best friend's huge shoulders and hold on, rocking him back and forth. The guys all left him to it and found stuff to do. Murray, Firth, and Blazinski set about cleaning up the gear while the defenders gathered round the damaged wall and held a hushed consultation with one another. Just as the last of the plates was being racked up, Rebar sidled over and gave John a tap on the shoulder. Dude, that was a structural wall he busted? He whispered. We kinda need everyone out of here while we make it safe. John nodded at him, then gave Adam's back a hefty pat. Hey, horse? Man, we gotta move, okay? Come on, let's get you something to eat. Adam nodded against his chest and asked in the most childish tone that John had ever heard him produce, Can I have Eggos? Everyone had to pause to look at one another despite the broken wall. Adam Aries, Mr. Nutrition himself, the best cook on the team, and Eggos? Those were just two concepts that didn't go together, but now was not the time to argue. Sure, brother, sure, all the Eggos you want, man. Come on. I'll sort that elbow out while we're cooking. Okay. Date point. 10 years, 2 months, 2 weeks, and 1 day after Vancouver. Folktha, Cimbrian. The Far Reaches. Charlotte Gilroy. Charlotte and Ben had landed on their feet with the move to Cimbrian. As the only qualified midwife in town, not only was Charlotte busy, but she was well paid. Ben, meanwhile, had quickly and easily fallen in with the city planning department, and had been instrumental in devising an approach to utility infrastructure that should hopefully mean that Folktha's roads would never need to be dug up to access the sewerage, cables, and pipes that ran alongside rather than beneath them. Cheap housing, decent salaries, and rapid promotion? Folktha was a graduate's fantasy. except when it resulted in Charlotte's best friend slumped inconsolable over her kitchen table, of course. There was little they'd been able to do for Ava except keep up a steady supply of tea and comforting words and contact. Eventually, she sent Ben and Sean on a walk to go get some takeaway from the good Chinese place on the far side of town that didn't deliver. That earned her an hour of alone time for some girl talk. Ava certainly seemed to appreciate it. At least she muttered, "Thanks," as soon as they were gone. "Darling, you're going to have to come up for air sooner or later," Charlotte told her. It had the desired effect. Ava laughed, a thin, delicate, slightly hysterical laugh, but a laugh nonetheless, and finally unburied her face from her arms. Instead, she rested her elbows on the table and combed her fingers into her hair. "Sorry for being upset. I think you have a right. It's my own stupid fault, though," Ava sighed. Her hands dropped to the table and she sat back to stare up at the ceiling instead. "What was I thinking?" "Which bit?" "The bit where you did it, or the bit where you were caught?" "God, I don't know." Ava looked around the room. I don't know." The clock ticked for them a good 10 seconds or so before she sagged and gave Charlotte a pleading look. "What do you think?" Charlotte took her hands. "You know, that's the first time you've asked for my opinion on this." "It is?" "Yeah." "Oh." Ava blinked at their hands. "You'd have told me not to do it, wouldn't you?" "I would have," Charlotte agreed. "Why didn't you?" "You didn't ask." Charlotte gave her an apologetic facial shrug. "And I don't think you'd have listened either." Ava paused, then nodded and shut her eyes. "You know why I did it, though, right?" "Darling, you did it because you were lonely and horny and Sean's hot and caring and he's a good match for you," Charlotte asserted. "Don't overthink it." "But that's just the problem!" Ava exploded, tugging her hand out of Charlotte's grip to gesticulate. "I didn't think about it enough! Or I thought about it, trying to... She gripped her hair again. "I don't know where I went wrong!" "Maybe the bit where you cheated on your boyfriend," Charlotte suggested. Not unjustifiably, Ava glared at her. "No, darling, maybe it really is that simple. Maybe you should have either asked him for permission or broken up with him. Treated him honestly." "You're taking his side?" Ava asked. "You're not?" Ava hesitated, then swallowed, sighed, and rubbed her face. "I'm sorry," she said. "You're right, I should have. He said it himself, he was separated from me, too." "Working relationships are about honesty," Charlotte told her. "If you ever have to hide something, if you ever have to lie about something, maybe it's not working." Ava nodded miserably. And it wasn't working for a long time. Right from the moment he decided to sign up," she said. "Don't blame him," Charlotte cautioned. I don't. He was doing what he had to, but I should have told him then that I wasn't happy with it. Maybe if I'd done that." Ava sighed and shook her head slowly. "It's done. Can't change it. I can't bring it back. Just like I can't bring Sarah back, or home, or anything. I wish I could, but I can't." "So, what are you going to do?" Ava flapped her arms in a resigned shrug. "Move on. I can't stay here, not with Adam and Gabe. I won't be able to..." She paused, exasperated by her own lack of eloquence, then stood up. "The boys will be back in what, an hour?" "Give or take," Charlotte agreed, as Ava shrugged her coat on and headed for the door. "Why? What are you..." "I'm going to say goodbye to Dad." Date point: 10 years, 2 months, and 2 weeks after Vancouver. Byron Group Exploration Vessel 8. Creature of Habit. The Border Stars. Proximal End. Kevin Jenkins. "Hey Jenks, we're coming up on RS-449. The Byron Group had sunk billions of dollars into starships, and the first few had all gone missing, as had the ones sent to find out what happened to them. Byron Stellar Exploration's working theory was that they had all suffered some kind of technical failure, and as such the group's starship building program was on hold until they figured out what that failure might be. Number 8, therefore, was a Dominion-built vessel, custom-made by the assembly gantries at Erbzerk's shipyards after a substantial bribe. It stuck in the craw to rely on alien tech, but at least it was alien tech built to the customer's exacting specifications. It was, in the shipyard's estimation, the ugliest thing they had ever built, and they had described it in contemptuous terms that translated to something like throwback. It wasn't hard to see why. BGEV-8 was shaped for atmospheric re-entry, water landing, and seaworthiness, all of which had put constraints on her physical properties and dimensions, which had completely forbidden the Abzerkian designers from flexing their creative muscles, especially when the clients had insisted on redundant steel bulkheads throughout, and that every component in the ship be A, modular, and B, accessible at a moment's notice. She looked more like a seafaring relic than a modern spaceship. There had been plenty of technical challenges, too, during the design phase, long before the commission had been sent to Erbzerk. For starters, a ship's top superluminal speed was in part a function of its sublight power-to-weight ratio and acceleration, and in part a function of power to the warp engine, while BGEV's-8's power-to-weight ratio was excellent. Distinguishing that the order had been placed by a human organization had required ditching the capacitors and witches, and relying on the Dominion's preferred convention of a big reactor of some kind. This had limited the available power. The result was a stately top speed of 30 kilolights, enough to reach a nearby star in about 2 hours, but still decidedly pedestrian, and this had brought the supply problem into effect. Humans needed nutrients. Lots of nutrients. A crew of 7 could chew through 200 pounds of food in a week, and at 30 kilolights, BGEV's exploration missions were expected to take months. Months' worth of supplies would have made the ship heavier. Making the ship heavier would have hurt its power-to-weight ratio and slowed it down, meaning that it would need to carry even more supplies, which would have slowed it down further, and so on. While the equation did eventually balance itself, the end result was a much larger, much slower, and most importantly, much more expensive ship than Byron had wanted. The solution was stasis. Everyone's bed doubled as a stasis chamber, and the ship did a pretty cunning job of making sure that when you went to bed, you got a good 8 or 9 hours of sleep, and just as you were waking up fresh and ready for a new day, time stopped working for you until the duty officer decided you were needed again. Naturally, nobody wanted to be effectively alone for subjective weeks at a time, so in practice there were always 2 duty officers, and things were carefully mixed up so that everybody worked with everybody else at some point in the rotation. Today was Kevin's second day awake. He'd put Joe Gibbs to bed last night, and this morning had woken up to find Mitch Hamilton preparing breakfast for him. He liked Mitch the best out of their crew. Mitch could fix a decent cup of coffee and breakfast, though everyone agreed that Kevin was the best cook on board. Kevin was also the best general odd jobber, inventory sorter, cleaner, and handyman on the crew, which was why he was its quartermaster. Everybody else might have had the assorted skills that went into flying the ship or surveying whatever interesting planets they stumbled across, but Byron had quite correctly decided early on that every ship needed somebody whose job was to keep everybody else comfortable, clean, well-fed, and, ideally, well-advised. Sure, being a glorified custodian wasn't exactly glamorous, but the pay was even better than he'd been bringing in at Scotch Creek, and there was just something about being back out in the galaxy again. Something about the thrill of knowing that for better or worse, they were doing something real, contributing to taking some of humanity's eggs out of a single, vulnerable basket. And if he was honest, something about the thrill of danger. He wasn't a vagrant in a galaxy unaware of and unprepared for the human race now. He was a ship's quartermaster. "Gotcha. I'll wake him up," he called. Waking the other 5 was as simple as hitting the touchscreen on the wall as soon as he entered the room and selecting Wake All. Instantly, the black haze filling every bunk faded, and his 5 colleagues, friends one and all, were sitting up and looking around. "Station day?" Jenny asked. She was their biochemistry expert, a specialist whose job revolved around examining whatever organic compounds and weird alien life forms they turned up. It was a good thing she was just as capable with keeping the ship in peak condition because their most recent circuit hadn't turned up even a single temperate world, a fact that made her tenure on this first survey vessel increasingly tenuous. Why waste crew resources on somebody who could be better used in a follow-up expedition? It would be a shame to see her go. "Yep, Mitch is shaking hands with him right now. Today's Friday, 14:30 ship time. Coffee?" Everyone nodded eagerly and promptly set about their morning ablutions. 3 years of working together had sorted out a few kinks and sticking points there. When everyone was awake, nobody got to soak in the shower or meditate on the shitter. You got in, you did your business, you cleaned up, and if you forgot to take your clothes or towel in with you, too bad for you. Modesty was a luxury, and not one that the rest of the crew were obligated to engineer on your behalf. Everybody was grabbing cups of coffee with wet hair in short order. Mitch, however, was frowning when he stuck his head round the hatch to the flight deck. "Yo, they're refusing us docking," he called. Everyone exchanged glances, and Monica and Derek, co-pilot and flight engineer respectively, squeezed into their seats, leaving the three scientists and Kevin to eavesdrop. "Did they say why?" "Nope, not yet. Resupply Station 449er, Byron Group Echo Victor 8 again. We'd sure appreciate an explanation. Why are we being denied permission? Over?" "Because we're human, why else?" Kevin murmured rhetorically, quietly enough so the three on the flight deck wouldn't hear. "You think something happened?" their resident astronomer, Charlie, asked him in a whisper. "Yep." "Like what?" Jennifer asked. "Swarm of swarms. Bet you." "No bet," Ryan grunted. He was their geologist and, as such, by far and away the most profitable member of the crew. He liked to joke that the job of the other six was to get him to some place where he could dig up something valuable. "Yeah, never go against Jenks' nose for xenopolitics," Charlie agreed. "Never go against his nose for politics, full stop," Jenny agreed. "Jesus, they're launching fighters," Derek announced. "They really don't want us docking." "Whoa there, take it easy, 449er. You can plainly see we're holding position. May we at least synchronize comms?" "Remind them they have to under Article 7 of the..." Kevin began to tell him. "I know, Jenks," Derek snapped. "Okay." "Youch," Charlie muttered. "It's cool, he's just stressed. I'll get the big screen turned on." Ryan frowned at him. "Why?" "Because there's going to be a message from Byron waiting for us." He was right. No sooner had Derek bullied the station into grudgingly allowing BGEV-8 to synchronize with the interstellar communications relay than the ship was announcing a priority message for all eyes. Monica put a few tactful light minutes between them and the station, and they went dark in interplanetary space before relaxing enough to gather in the ship's common area, a circular lounge with furniture that folded into the deck to make room for the gym mat, and load the message. Sure enough, their billionaire employer's frowning visage was the very first frame of the message. "If I'm any judge, you'll have an inkling something's wrong by the time you get this. If I know non-humans, they're probably in the grip of a panic again. Enclosed is footage which explains why in detail, but I'll make it short. The swarm of swarms capped Capital Station. Destroyed it, in fact. Some kind of human spaceborne special forces called the SOR got involved, and it's all in the video briefing that follows these orders. Come back ASAP. Carter, Brown, you're clear to use the emergency recall. I want the 7 of you at our policy meeting. See you shortly." "Emergency recall?" Kevin asked. "You heard the man, Mitch," Monica said, and tugged the chain that she'd had round her neck from day one out from inside her vest. Mitch Carter produced something from his pocket, and together they slipped into the bridge. "Emergency recall," Kevin repeated. "Little something the group gave us after losing all those other ships," Monica replied. There was a subtle sound, a little like somebody had thumped a bulkhead with their fist and caused the whole ship to give a dull ring. Interplanetary dark space was gone in an instant, replaced to one side by a gray and cratered horizon, and rising above it... "Oh no," Kevin moaned. "That stupid son of a bitch." "What?" Ryan asked. "He's had an open jump beacon to Earth this whole time?" "Our emergency recall, yeah. What, is that a problem?" Kevin spun on his heel and headed for his locker. "That's between me and Moses Byron," he replied. All right, guys, thanks so much for being here with me on this one today. We recorded this whole thing while streaming on 3/4/23. It was a good stream. It was pretty long. Right now, the entirety of the stream has been from 3:30 to 6:40, so like 3 hours. Beyond that, I hope you guys have a great day. Like, comment, and subscribe. Go to the Patreon and click the link. Go to the Discord. Hang out with like-minded people that love HFY and humans or space orcs and all that fun stuff. Oh, what is your favorite insect? Mine is June bugs. They smell like ass and they're really annoying, but they're very pretty. All right, guys. I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye!